The cafe smelled of burnt caramel and wet wool, the kind of place where people hid from the rain and from themselves. Outside, London hurried past in a blur of umbrellas and buses, but inside, time slowed to the pace of steam rising from chipped mugs. Her car declined with a sound that felt louder than it was. A small, apologetic beep. The barista glanced up, then away, trained to pretend these moments didn't matter. The woman froze, fingers tightening around the edge of the counter. She was well dressed, but not loudly so. No logos, no flash. A camel coat, slightly creased at the elbows. Hair pulled back with the sort of care that suggested habit, not vanity. She smiled quickly, the reflex of someone used to control. "Oh, sorry," she said softly. "Let me try again." The machine beeped again. Final this time. Behind her, the queue shifted. A sigh. Someone checked their watch. London impatience had a particular rhythm to it. She felt heat rise to her face. Not because she couldn't afford the coffee, but because for the first time in years, something hadn't worked when it was supposed to. Her phone buzzed in her hand. Another notification. Another reminder of the morning she was trying not to think about. "That's all right," the barista said, already sliding the cup aside. "You can step to the—" "I've got it." The voice came from behind her. Calm. Male. Unhurried. She turned. He was ordinary in the way that made him nearly invisible. Early 30s, maybe. Dark coat, rain damp at the shoulders. No suit, no headphones. He held a takeaway cup in one hand and a folded newspaper in the other, as if this was exactly where he intended to be. "You don't have to," she said quickly. "I know," he replied, already tapping his card. "But I can." The machine approved the payment with cheerful indifference. He slid the coffee back towards her. "There you go." For a moment, she just looked at him. People didn't do this anymore. Not without a reason. Not without expecting something. "Thank you," she said at last. "I'll pay you back." He shrugged. "No need. It's just coffee." Just coffee. The phrase landed heavier than it should have. She took the cup, their fingers brushing briefly. His hand was warm, steady. He smiled. Not the practiced smile of sales or charm, but something simpler, as if kindness were muscle memory. She stepped aside to let the queue move, heart thudding in a way that had nothing to do with caffeine. "Card troubles?" he asked lightly, collecting his change though there was none. "Something like that," she replied. They stood near the window, rain streaking the glass between them and the city. For a few seconds, neither spoke. Then she laughed, quietly, almost surprised by herself. "I run companies worth millions," she said, as if confessing a joke only she could hear. "And I can't buy a coffee." He raised an eyebrow. "Happens to the best of us." "You don't look convinced." "I don't look impressed either," he said. "Which is probably healthier." She studied him more closely now. There was tiredness there, but not bitterness. A man who noticed small things. The way people spoke. The way the barista flinched when the machine beeped. The way she had tried not to. "I'm Emma," she said, then hesitated. She almost added her surname. Almost added the title people usually reacted to. She didn't. "Daniel," he replied. They sipped their coffee in companionable silence. Outside, a cyclist splashed through a puddle. Somewhere, a siren wailed and faded. "So," he said eventually, nodding at her phone. "Bad morning." She exhaled slowly. "One of those where everything you thought was solid suddenly isn't." He considered that. "Those are dangerous." "And necessary," she added. He smiled again. "You sound like someone who gives keynote speeches." She laughed properly this time. "You have no idea." Her phone buzzed again. This time she looked. Her jaw tightened. "You don't have to answer that," he said. "I do," she replied. "But I don't want to." "Then don't." "Not yet." She looked at him, surprised. People usually encouraged urgency. Action. Control. Not pause. "You're very calm for someone paying for strangers' coffee," she said. "My mum raised me," he replied simply. They talked then. About nothing important. About how the rain never seemed to end. About the cafe playing the wrong music for the time of day. About how people in London were lonely together. She didn't tell him she was the CEO of a global tech firm negotiating a hostile board takeover. She didn't tell him she'd spent the night deciding whether to fire someone she once trusted. She didn't tell him the card hadn't declined because of lack of money, but because she'd frozen all her accounts herself, on legal advice, an hour earlier. For once, she was just a woman holding a coffee someone else had paid for. "I should go," she said eventually. "Of course." She reached into her bag, pulled out a card, then stopped. Thought better of it. Instead, she wrote her number on a napkin. "In case I ever get the chance to return the favor," she said. He took it without ceremony. "I'll hold you to that." As she stepped back into the rain, she felt lighter. Not because her problems had vanished, but because for 10 minutes she hadn't been alone with them. Across the street, her driver waited, confused to see her walking instead of calling. Daniel watched her go, unfolding the napkin, then folding it carefully into his pocket. He didn't notice the black car pull up beside her. He didn't hear the driver say, "Ms. Carter, the board is on the line." And he certainly didn't know that the woman whose coffee he'd just paid for was about to make a decision that would change thousands of lives, including, eventually, his, because as Emma turned once more to glance back at the cafe window, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice dropped into a tone that held power like a drawn blade, and she said, "No. We're not selling. Prepare the counteroffer, and if they push again, I want everything on Daniel." "Everything on Daniel." She stopped herself mid-sentence, eyes narrowing slightly. "No. Strike that. I'll handle this personally." The driver met her gaze in the rearview mirror, wisely asking nothing. The car eased into traffic, rain drumming softly against the roof. Emma leaned back, staring at the blurred city lights, her mind already racing ahead. The board wanted speed. The investors wanted blood. And for the first time since she'd taken the role, Emma wasn't sure she wanted to win the way they expected her to. Back at the cafe, Daniel finished his coffee more slowly than usual. He wasn't sure why the encounter lingered. He met hundreds of people a week in his work. Faces, names, moments that slipped away, but this one clung, like a tune you couldn't quite forget. Perhaps it was the way she listened. Or the way she'd laughed, surprised by her own sound. He folded his newspaper, stood, and nodded a quiet goodbye to the barista. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist. He checked his phone, 3 missed calls, all from the same number. He sighed. By noon, Emma was seated at a long glass table overlooking the Thames, lawyers on one side, executives on the other. Screens glowed with projections and timelines. Words like acquisition, leverage, exposure flew through the air. "She's stalling," one of them said. "If we don't move now." "I said I'll handle it," Emma replied, her voice steady. "This isn't fear. It's strategy." They exchanged glances. They always did when she spoke like that. Emma Carter didn't hesitate. Not publicly. Not ever. Yet as the meeting dragged on, her mind kept drifting back to a chipped mug and a stranger's unremarkable kindness. Daniel, meanwhile, spent his afternoon repairing a lift that refused to stay still. His hands moved automatically, but his thoughts wandered. He kept replaying the moment she'd said her name, as if it mattered more than it should have. Emma. Simple. Solid. At 4, his phone buzzed. An unfamiliar number. He hesitated, then answered. "Hello." "Daniel," came her voice. Calm. Recognizable. "It's Emma." He straightened without meaning to. "Hi. I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all." A pause. He imagined her somewhere high above the city, glass and steel, entirely unlike the cafe. "I wanted to thank you again," she said. "Properly." "You already did." "I know. But still." Another pause, heavier this time. "I'm having an odd day," she continued. "And I wondered if you might like to join me for a walk." Nothing formal. Just air. Daniel glanced at the broken lift, then at the city beyond the window. "I finish in 10 minutes. "Perfect," she said. They met by the river, coats brushing as they fell into step. The Thames moved steadily beside them, indifferent to ambition. "You don't usually do this, do you?" he asked. "Do what?" "Call strangers." She smiled faintly. "No. Then why me?" She considered. "Because you didn't ask who I was." They walked in silence for a while. Emma told him about pressure without naming names. About responsibility without numbers. Daniel listened, not fixing, not advising, just present. "I repair things," he said eventually. "People assume that means I like solutions. Mostly, I just like understanding how something broke." She glanced at him. And once you understand, sometimes you leave it broken a bit longer, so you don't repeat the mistake.
She laughed softly.
You're wiser than you look. So I've been told. Rarely.
Her phone buzzed again. She ignored it.
I can't stay long, she admitted.
But I didn't want today to pass without this. This? He asked.
This reminder, she said, gesturing vaguely between them, that the world isn't only made of deals.
They stopped at the edge of the bridge. Wind tugged at her hair.
For a moment,
Emma looked tired. Not powerful. Just human.
You know, Daniel said, if you ever need another coffee. I'll make sure my card works, she finished, smiling.
They parted without promises. But something had shifted.
That evening, Emma stood alone in her office, city lights below like scattered stars.
She reread an email she'd drafted and not sent. Then she deleted it. She picked up her phone and typed a new message.
Across town, Daniel's phone buzzed as he locked up for the night. Unknown number. Coffee tomorrow?
This time, I insist.
He smiled to himself, tucking the phone into his pocket as the rain began again, unaware that by agreeing, he was stepping into a world far larger than either of them yet understood, one where kindness had consequences, and small gestures echoed far longer than contracts ever could. The next morning arrived grey and undecided, the sort of London day that couldn't quite commit to rain but threatened it all the same. Daniel reached the cafe early, more out of habit than eagerness, though he told himself otherwise. He ordered his usual and chose a table near the window, hands wrapped around the cup, eyes drifting to the door more often than necessary. Emma arrived 5 minutes late, breathless, coat unbuttoned, hair slightly loose from its careful restraint. She scanned the room once, spotted him, and her face softened in a way that didn't happen in boardrooms. I hope you didn't think I'd vanished into thin air, she said, slipping into the chair opposite him.
I gave you another 10, he replied.
After that, I'd have assumed you were fictional. She smiled, then reached for her purse. My turn.
They stood at the counter together this time. Her card worked.
The barista didn't recognize her, and Emma found she liked that more than she should have. Back at the table, she seemed quieter. Not withdrawn, considered. Daniel noticed how she watched the room, not nervously, but as if mapping it. You're thinking about something big, he said. She didn't deny it. I'm deciding whether to disappoint a lot of powerful people. That usually means it's the right choice. Or the most expensive mistake of my career. Those aren't mutually exclusive.
She laughed under her breath.
You really don't scare easily, do you?
I do, he said.
I just don't panic about money.
Her gaze sharpened slightly.
Why not?
Because I've had none.
And I've had some.
And neither fixed what I thought they would. That stayed with her.
They talked until their cups were empty and the cafe grew crowded. When they finally stood to leave, Emma hesitated.
Would you have lunch with me? She asked.
Not today.
Soon. Depends, Daniel said.
Are we still pretending you're not incredibly important?
For as long as possible, she replied. He nodded.
Then yes. Over the next week, their meetings became a quiet pattern.
Walks instead of dinners. Simple places. No photos.
No names exchanged beyond first ones. Emma found herself leaving her phone in her bag more often, ignoring the relentless pull of alerts and decisions. Daniel, for his part, noticed changes too.
He slept better.
He paid more attention.
He started wondering what it would mean if this didn't stay small. On Friday, Emma cancelled. Just one line, I'm sorry.
Today exploded. Rain check. Daniel stared at the message longer than he meant to. He typed back, of course. Then added, take care. He put the phone away, telling himself it didn't matter.
That people drifted. That this was normal.
But that night, Emma stood in a room full of men who spoke over her and smiled too tightly. The deal had turned vicious.
Someone had leaked information. Trust had collapsed.
We need to move now, her CFO insisted. If we don't sign, they will. Emma looked around the table, seeing faces she'd once believed in. She thought of Daniel's hands, oil-stained, steady. Of a man who fixed what broke, not what profited.
No, she said quietly. The room stilled. I won't sign, she repeated.
If that costs us investors, so be it. I won't burn this company to keep my seat warm.
You're being emotional, someone scoffed.
Yes,
Emma replied. And I'm done apologizing for it. She walked out before they could stop her. The fallout was immediate. Calls, messages, threats dressed as concern.
Emma turned her phone off and sat alone in her car, hands shaking for the first time in years.
Without overthinking it, she drove.
Daniel was closing the workshop when she arrived, eyes red, coat damp, composure finally fractured. "I don't know where else to go," she said, voice unsteady.
He didn't ask questions. He unlocked the door and let her in.
They sat on overturned crates, the smell of metal and oil sharp in the air. Emma spoke then, not in headlines or summaries, but truth.
About loneliness.
About the cost of always being right. About how exhausting it was to be the strongest person in every room. Daniel listened, jaw tight, heart heavier with every word. When she finished, silence settled between them, thick but not awkward. "You know," he said gently, "you don't have to carry all of that alone."
She looked at him, eyes shining. "I don't know how not to."
"Then learn," he said. Slowly.
She laughed weakly.
"You make it sound simple." "It isn't," he agreed. "But it's possible." Outside, rain began in earnest, drumming against the roof. Emma leaned back, exhaustion pulling at her shoulders. "I might lose everything," she admitted. "Or you might save it," Daniel said. "Including yourself." She closed her eyes, breathing him in, the space, the moment. For the first time in years, the future felt uncertain in a way that didn't terrify her.
Her phone buzzed in her bag. She didn't reach for it.
Instead, she opened her eyes and looked at him.
"Stay," she said softly. Not a command. A request.
Daniel didn't move. "I'm not going anywhere." And as the rain washed the city clean outside, neither of them realized that the line between their worlds had already blurred, that choices made in quiet rooms often carried the loudest consequences, and that somewhere beyond the workshop walls, forces were already shifting, reacting, preparing to collide with a bond neither of them had planned but both had begun to need. Morning crept in through the high workshop windows, pale and unsure. Daniel stirred first, stiff from the crate he'd half slept on, half kept watch from. Emma was still there, curled slightly inward, coat folded beneath her head, breathing slow and even. For a moment he simply observed her, not as the woman who commanded rooms, but as someone who had finally allowed herself to rest. He rose quietly and made tea on the small burner in the corner. The kettle's soft hiss filled the space. When he turned, she was awake, sitting up, hair loose, eyes clearer but heavy with the weight of what waited outside these walls.
"You didn't disappear," she said.
"Still here," he replied, handing her a mug. She wrapped her hands around it, as if anchoring herself.
"Thank you.
For last night."
"You don't owe me thanks for staying," he said.
"You needed somewhere steady."
She studied him. "You keep saying things like that.
As if steadiness is something you can choose."
"For me, it is," he said. "I fix lifts."
"If they panic, people get hurt."
A faint smile touched her mouth. "I wish my world worked like that."
Something breaks, you find the fault, you repair it. "Sometimes you just stop it from falling," he said. "Repair comes later." Her phone buzzed again, persistent now. She glanced at the screen, jaw tightening, but didn't answer.
"They won't stop," she said.
"They never do." "Do you want them to?"
Daniel asked. She hesitated. "Part of me does.
Part of me wants them to feel what it's like to lose control."
"And the other part?"
"The other part is tired of fighting people who only understand winning."
Daniel leaned against the workbench.
"Then don't fight them on their terms."
She laughed softly.
"You make it sound like a chess move."
"It is," he said. "Just not their game."
Later that day, Emma returned home, showered, changed, and stepped back into her world.
She turned her phone on.
The flood came instantly, missed calls, messages stacked like accusations. She read them without responding, then opened her laptop and began writing.
Not statements. Not defenses. Plans.
Across the city, Daniel went back to work, but his hands felt clumsier than usual. He kept replaying the way she'd said his name, the way she'd looked at him as if he was something solid in a shifting landscape.
He told himself not to read into it.
Worlds like hers didn't brush against his by accident. When they did, it was usually brief. By evening, Emma stood before her board again, posture straight, voice calm.
"I'm restructuring," she said.
Effective immediately.
Outrage followed. Threats. Disbelief.
"You can't," Someone snapped.
I can, she replied.
And I am. She outlined her vision: slower growth, ethical partnerships, internal audits that would expose more than one quiet betrayal.
Faces paled. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a reckoning.
When it ended, she walked out alone, heart pounding, knowing she'd drawn a line that couldn't be erased.
She didn't call Daniel right away.
She wanted to sit with the aftermath, to make sure the strength she felt wasn't borrowed. But when the night stretched thin and doubts crept in, she found herself typing his name.
He answered on the second ring. It's done, she said. Do you feel worse? He asked. No, she admitted. Terrified.
But lighter. That's usually the right direction. They met again by the river, the city quieter now, lights trembling on dark water.
Emma spoke of consequences.
Daniel spoke of weathered machinery and patience. Somewhere between their words, a different understanding took shape. I don't know where this goes, Emma said eventually.
Daniel nodded.
Neither do I.
That scares me. It should, he said.
But it doesn't have to stop you.
She watched a boat slide past, wake rippling outward. People will find out about you, she said. About us talking.
They'll ask questions. Let them, Daniel said. I'm not a secret. She turned to him then, something raw in her eyes.
You don't know how rare that is in my world. I'm starting to learn, he replied. Days passed. News broke. Analysts speculated. Headlines sharpened.
Emma's name was everywhere again, this time framed by uncertainty instead of praise. Through it all, she and Daniel found stolen moments. Coffee at dawn, messages sent between meetings, silence that felt like conversation. One afternoon, Daniel's supervisor called him into the office. There's a journalist asking about you, the man said. Says you know Emma Carter.
Daniel felt his stomach drop.
I do.
You want to explain that?
Daniel considered lying.
Then he thought of Emma standing her ground. No, he said.
I don't.
That evening, Emma found him quieter than usual. They are circling, he said.
Your world.
Our world, she asked gently. He met her gaze. If you want it to be.
She inhaled, steadying herself. I don't know how to protect you from what comes with me. You don't have to, he said. Just don't pretend it's not real. She reached for his hand, tentative but certain. The city hummed around them, indifferent and immense. Somewhere, deals were being rewritten. Alliances strained. Futures recalculated. And in the space between who they had been and who they were becoming, Emma and Daniel stood side by side, aware that whatever followed would demand courage neither of them could outsource, and that the most dangerous choice they had made so far wasn't defying a board or opening a door in the rain, but allowing something honest to exist in a world built on appearances, knowing full well that once seen, it could never be hidden again.
The story did not break all at once.
It unfolded the way real lives do, quietly, then suddenly.
The article came out on a Tuesday morning.
Not cruel, not kind.
Just curious.
A photograph of Emma stepping out of a building, expression unreadable.
A paragraph about her bold restructuring.
And then, almost as an aside, a line about an unexpected personal connection with a maintenance engineer named Daniel. The world noticed. Shares wobbled. Commentators speculated. Some praised her authenticity. Others sharpened knives, calling it reckless, unprofessional, a distraction. Emma read none of it. She stood by the window of her office, phone in her hand, knowing exactly who would be affected first.
Daniel. She found him at the workshop that evening, finishing late on purpose. When he saw her, he knew before she spoke. I'm sorry, she said. Not as a CEO. As a woman who cared. He wiped his hands and met her eyes.
For what? For bringing noise into your life. He considered that, then smiled faintly. It was never silent. Just smaller. They walked, as they always did, no destination in mind. Emma spoke of resignations, of threats disguised as concern, of being told, again, that she was brilliant but difficult.
They've always said that, Daniel replied.
About women who won't shrink.
She stopped walking then. Looked at him properly.
You know, there are moments when I wonder what would have happened if my card hadn't declined. You'd have paid for your coffee, he said. And would have missed everything. The pressure came to a head weeks later.
The board forced a vote.
The markets held their breath. Emma stood alone at the table, No speech prepared, no charm deployed.
I won't be managed by fear, she said simply.
If that costs me this role, so be it.
The decision was narrow. Painfully so. She won. But victory felt different this time. Quieter. Heavier. As if it demanded something in return. That night, she didn't go back to her penthouse.
She went to Daniel's small flat, sat on the floor with takeaway containers between them, shoes kicked aside like any other tired Londoners.
I don't know how to do this, she admitted.
Be this person at work, and this person here.
Daniel leaned back against the sofa. You don't have to merge them. Just don't lie to either. Weeks passed. The noise softened.
A new normal emerged, still intense, still public, but steadier. Emma delegated more.
Listened more.
Daniel learned what it meant to have strangers recognize him, to be discussed in rooms he'd never enter.
There were arguments. Long silences. Moments where the gap between their worlds felt too wide to bridge.
One evening, after a particularly brutal day, Emma said quietly, I could make this easier.
For you. He knew what she meant. Distance. Discretion. An ending framed as dignity. And would it be true? He asked. She swallowed. No.
Then don't, he said.
I didn't choose you because it was easy.
She looked at him then, really looked, and understood something she'd spent her life outrunning. Strength didn't always announce itself.
Sometimes it simply stayed.
Months later, Emma stood on a small stage, not announcing profits or acquisitions, but a new initiative: apprenticeships, fair wages, internal transparency.
The applause was real this time. Earned.
Daniel watched from the back, unnoticed, exactly where he preferred to be. Afterwards, as they walked home under a sky clearing at last, Emma slipped her hand into his. You know, she said, smiling, people still ask how we met. What do you tell them?
The truth, she replied.
That you paid for my coffee when my card declined.
He laughed. They never believe that. They don't have to, she said.
It's ours.
They stopped at the same cafe where it had begun.
The same chipped mugs. The same smell of caramel and rain. Emma paid this time, deliberately, then paused.
Funny, she said.
4 years, I thought money was what kept me safe.
And now? She glanced at him.
Now I know it was never the point. They sat by the window, watching London move as it always had, busy, indifferent, alive. Two lives once parallel, now intertwined not by contracts or convenience, but by a moment of ordinary kindness that had quietly rewritten everything. And if anyone asked what changed the course of a millionaire CEO's life, the answer would never be found in board minutes or headlines, but in a simple truth the world often forgets. Sometimes, the smallest gestures carry the greatest weight, and the right cup of coffee, offered at the right moment, can teach you who you really are.